Well, good afternoon, and well done for making it out on a slightly drear afternoon. But good to see folk from last year, and good to see folk who weren't here last year. So here we go with three British philosophers, figureheads of the empirical tradition. Now, Genevieve chose as a song one that she said was philosophical, about looking for. And I have said this before within these four walls, but does anybody know what the flip definition of philosophy is? A blind man in a cellar, a coal cellar, at midnight, looking for a black cat that isn't there. You like it? Don't get discouraged, because although in many ways it can seem like that, you're looking for the black cat, and maybe the black cat isn't there, but you don't find some interesting stuff, as you would know if you've gone into an old cellar. Okay, three British philosophers, figureheads of the empirical tradition. More of that later on. You saw the pictures up there. Name me one of them, please. Bertrand Russell. Pretty good. Going back a bit in history. Bishop Berkeley, yes. And the other one? David Hume, probably my favourite philosopher. Anyhow, here we go. Here they are. So, which one's Berkeley? Top left. That's it. Under him, David Hume, and we all know the guy on the right. And it may be that some of you have had personal interaction, shall I say, with Bertrand Russell. I never met him personally, but I'll say more about that later on. Okay, Englishman, Scotsman and Irishman. Okay, no, this isn't a joke. So, Berkeley in the 17th century, David Hume, 18th century, Bertrand Russell, 20th century. Very, very different people, very interesting guys, each one of them. But they all represent a single tradition, and that is that you start with experience. You don't start with thinking. Now, in some ways, this could have been a reaction to what was happening on the continent with René Descartes and Baruch Spinoza and other people of whom we have spoken in the past. But this is a very British kind of philosophy. And I'm not ashamed to be British, and I'm not ashamed of this philosophy, which I find still stimulates me, and I hope this will this afternoon. And although the song says, I still haven't found what I'm looking for, I hope you'll find some stuff this afternoon that will be stimulating, that will lead on further. Maybe some of it will answer some questions, who knows? But there we go, you've shown up heroically on this afternoon, and here we go. So, I think therefore I am, René Descartes, doubted everything he could, but he could not doubt that he was thinking. Whether he could doubt there was actually a person doing the thinking, that's another question, but not for today. And a number of people, even among his friends, within just months of René Descartes coming out with the Meditations, which begins with I think therefore I am, they had serious objections. And you may be sure that in Britain and in other places there were serious objections also. And one of those who really took Descartes apart was Bishop Berkeley, a very, very interesting guy. Now, here we see him, and his most famous quotation, to be is to be perceived. Okay? Not I think, therefore I exist, but to be is to be perceived. Now, one might think, well, that's a little bit glib, that there's not much in that. But for somebody to say that in the 18th century, as he did, was incredibly, incredible foresight. So much has been picked out of Berkeley in the 20th century, saying, hey, he was onto something. And I want to unpack that a little bit with this first slide. And it says up there, sometimes philosophers and mathematicians get there before the science. Now, this is interesting, isn't it? Because philosophers are using their mind, their thinking. Mathematicians are using their mind, their thinking. The thinking sometimes gets there before the experience. So Descartes had got something going for him, I think. But this is the other side of the coin, that experience will tell us important stuff. So at the top you have another slogan, which you may have come across. Observation collapses the wave function. Now this has been going since the 1930s, but nobody ever told me it at school, and I went to school in the 50s, secondary school, well, the 50s and the 60s. Nobody ever told me this about observation collapsing the wave function, but basically, and we'll look at a slide on this in a minute, basically it means that just looking at stuff at the very tiny level of the subatomic particles, the pi mesons, the bosons, the God particle, all these names that people give to them, at that level, just looking at them changes things. Now we'll go into that a little bit more, but that is ever so close to what Berkeley said, to be is to be perceived. Now, among other things that Berkeley came out with was that he denied absolute space and time. In other words, there's not a sort of clock by which the whole universe runs. You can't say it's 6 o'clock on Mercury at the moment or anything like that. But Newton's laws of motion depend upon space being something that you can deal with reliably, on time being something which is constant. Now, Kant, a century later on, Immanuel Kant, German philosopher, sorry about that, he challenged it, and then later on, absolute space and time becomes a central pillar of Einstein's theories of relativity. So Berkeley was there before Einstein. Now, I said a little bit about observation collapses the wave function. Now, if I forget who it was, I think it was Heisenberg said, if anybody says they understand quantum mechanics, they don't. Now, so we're in good company. But there are things about it which can lead us into understanding. So, observation collapses the wave function. On the right of your screen there, you have, on the left of your screen, you have a depiction of the wave function, which is meant to be just waves and all sorts of things that are nothing much. The wave is infinite possibility. It's not being. Now, an analogy we can use here is one of TV. That in this room at the moment, as you would know, there are lots and lots of electromagnetic waves. And that if any one of us were to get so bored as to switch off from what I'm saying, you could on your mobile phone, I don't doubt, get ITV or BBC One or something like that, because the room is full of those vibrations, which we call electromagnetic waves. It's full of those, but we can't see them. They're like a kind of jumble, like on the left there. But you tune in a TV to it, or you tune in a mobile phone to it, and then suddenly you've got pictures, you've got the program. In some ways, that's a bit like when we look at the stuff that's happening at this very, very tiny level, then it causes it to collapse into something. It could be all manner of things, but just looking at it, and sometimes it could be our state of mind in looking at it, causes it to collapse in a certain way. Now, we'll have more of that later on, but that's this picture depicting it. So the wave function collapses, and out of it come things. Come on, baby. Don't let me down. That's it. Right. Now, said that sometimes maths leads the way. Now, don't worry, this is not going to go too deep, and I was never very good at maths at school. But philosophy is a good way into maths, actually. Now, many thinkers, among them David Hume, mocked at 17th century mathematicians, including René Descartes, who was a brilliant mathematician, who worked with imaginary and complex numbers. Now you take your calculator or your phone or whatever it is, you say, well, what is the square root of -1? What will it chuck up at you? It'll say error message, right? Your calculator will not give you the square root of -1, right? But mathematicians, being that kind of curious breed of individual, well, supposing that there is such a number as the square root of -1, how would it work out? Well, and they did that, and they worked out a mathematics on it, but all sorts of people, you're wasting your time. Come on, why don't you do something useful, like making sure that a bridge is strong enough to bear the weight of the traffic that's going to go on it? Do something useful with your maths, okay? But lo and behold, in the 19th century, a use came up for complex numbers. And nobody'd known about alternating current before the 19th century, and Faraday and that lot. Nobody knew about it. It didn't exist in terms of people's experience. But they found that complex numbers didn't have help when it came to writing the equations to do the calculations about alternating current. I did put this up here, and in the reading list, I will give you details of sites on YouTube particularly, which have helped somebody like me get my head around imaginary numbers a bit. So, but here we are. Complex numbers consists of, a complex number is Z, consists of X, which is the real part, that'll be, could be 13, could be 24, and then it's an imaginary number, which is I times y, and the two combined give you this thing called a complex number. Don't worry too much. You can check it out with the the reading list. Now here's a depiction that I found that I find is helpful to me, and I hope it's helpful to you. I know it looks a bit confused, doesn't it? But in the middle of it, you've got a head, and then you've got all these sort of wavy things all around it. Now, absolutely crucial to quantum mechanics and the whole theory of modern physics is that beneath the world that we experience, and that includes us, right? Beneath it all is a kind of oceanic flux of energy, waves, vibrations. You can call it all sorts of things, and they're probably none of them actually accurate. But that there is this sort of field, as it's referred to, that underlies absolutely everything. And we are part of it. But interestingly, we are also saying, hey, there is a field. So we are reflecting upon it. But it's all grounded in the field, ourselves and this great thing of which we and the whole cosmos are part of. A bit mind-blowing. Anyway, when you get the PowerPoint, you can meditate upon that picture, and who knows what will come. Right, nearly finished with Berkeley, and it isn't 20 to 3 yet. Wow. Right. Ronald Knox was a theologian and a philosopher, and he had a sort of way of putting things that was, I think, very helpful, and he wrote this limerick. There was a young man who said, God must find it exceedingly odd to think that the tree should continue to be when there's no one about in the quad. So if the existence of this tree depends upon it being observed, what about when everybody's off on vacation and there's nobody in the quad to look at the tree? Is there anyone here who knows God's reply in limerick form? You do, come on.
Well, I am always about in the quad.
That's right, that's right. Well done. Go to the top of the class, but don't fall off. Right, well done. Right, dear sir, your astonishment's odd. I am always about in the quad, and that's why the tree will continue to be, since observed by yours faithfully, God. Now, a bit clever, isn't it? But remember, this great philosopher, Berkeley, was also a bishop. Right. So there was mileage in what he was saying for a bit of theology. That nobody, no human being may be perhaps observing the tree in the quad or there to hear whether the tree that falls to the ground in the forest makes a sound. No human may be there. But Berkeley said God is there, and it's through God's observing that all that is in being continues to be in existence. Now that, I think, is a very, very deep insight, and somebody else who felt that way was Paul Tillich. Now, he perhaps is one of the leading theologians of the 20th century, and I can remember this because he died in 1965. How many people remember when the book Honest to God came out? If you do, would you raise a hand? Jessica, we're in good we're in good company. What did you think when did you read it when it came out?
I did, yes.
What did you think of it?
Do you know, it's difficult to remember, but I think I thought it was nonsense.
Right. Okay, well, I read it.
I don't remember being impressed by it.
Right. I read it. I couldn't have been more than 15, 16, something like that. And I thought, I don't really understand this, but I think one day I will. So, yeah. But Bishop Robinson, who wrote the book, Honest to God, which caused a great upstink in the 60s, huge upstink. And one of the people who would have been very influential upon it would have been Paul Tillich, who was a German theologian, had to check out of Germany in the 1930s, like a lot of people did, went to the States, and he, again, shocked some people up by this by saying, God does not exist as a being besides others. Some people accused him of being an atheist and all that kind of thing, but his take on the world is very similar to Berkeley's. The name of this infinite and exhaustible depth and ground of all being is God. All right? So for Tillich, God is the ground of our being. He is not a being who exists like a power station or you and me or the Eiffel Tower. He's not a being in that sense, but he is the ground of all being. And I'll chuck some Paul Tillich in the reading list as well. So there's a little bit of Berkeley's enduring influence and the insights that he had, having considerable influence into the 20th century and beyond. Right, to David Hume. Now, I haven't got it with me. Hume's fork. I used to always carry it around with me when I was doing philosophy a lot more than these days. But if you go into any well-appointed chip shop, you will find that they will offer you, probably free of charge, made of wood, a little fork about so long, and with 2 prongs. Now, we're used to, of course, having forks that have 4 prongs, or maybe 3 if it's a pickle fork, but I suppose a carving fork has 2 prongs, doesn't it? But David Hume's fork is a very powerful way of considering knowledge. And if you've never encountered David Hume, I would say get hold of the 3 things that we're going to look at this afternoon regarding him. And if you're with somebody who is trying to put one over on you, or somebody who's talking nonsense, then Hume's fork will be very helpful in sorting things out. Now, David Hume said, basically, there's only 2 ways of really knowing something. Our knowledge of the world is based on sense impressions, such matters of fact. The TV is working as opposed to it not working, like it was about 2 o'clock today, because it's been plugged in now properly. Matters of fact are based on experience, and don't worry about this too much, and their truth is synthetic. The predicate is not contained in the object. They can be denied without contradiction. That is the important thing, right? Because there are some things that cannot be denied without contradiction. But if it can be denied without contradiction, then that's all right. It's raining. I don't know if it's raining or not. I'm not too fussed. We're in here in the dry and in the warm. But it might not be raining. It might have stopped already. I don't know. The sun hasn't really come out. But it's raining is a statement of fact. If you're getting wet, then you know you're getting wet. It's a statement of fact. But it could be denied without contradiction. It could suddenly stop raining. Then relations of ideas, triangles have three sides, are known a priori. In other words, prior to any experience that you might have, you know a triangle is going to have three sides. Right? They cannot be denied without contradiction. So all bachelors are male. Right? You don't need to join the changing rooms to check them out. You know if somebody's a bachelor that they are male. That's not a very good example, is it, these days? Sorry. Oh, my. Yes. It sort of stuff comes back to me from my days in the secondary classroom. Now that's not a very good one, is it? Who's got a better one of something that, a synthetic truth, an analytic truth, sorry. All triangles have three sides. Okay, my mind's gone a blank. Sorry? X equals X. Right? Sorry?
1 and 1 makes 2.
Pretty good, yes. Okay, so relation of ideas and sense impressions. Now, David Hume said anything that's not based on either of those two things is nonsense. All right? Now, I don't necessarily agree with him in that, but it would be complicated to go into the reasons, but it's a very good way of sorting out stuff that people say. Is it relations of ideas? Is it matters of fact? And that can help in terms of sorting out sense from nonsense. The second thing is the copy principle. Now, David Hume said that the ideas we have in our minds are copies of impressions. Now, an impression, David Hume would have loved to have said, was something outside of yourself. The trouble is, he'd read his Descartes, and that Descartes, one of his great doubts was whether he could trust his senses. So David Hume says an impression is something that comes to you very strongly, an experience that comes to you very strongly, and that is an impression. So he says all simple ideas are copies of impressions. Complex ideas may be copied from or constructed out of impressions. So, all right, you can have an idea, an impression of a bridge, and you can have an impression of stone, and you put the two together, and you can imagine what a stone bridge would look like, even if you're not looking at one right now. Right? So you can put things together, but our knowledge of the world is based on sense impressions. If you cannot trace an impression, an idea in your mind back to an impression, a strong sense of something you've seen, then David Hume says don't trust it. I don't know if anybody ever said it to David Hume. He must have said, have you ever seen the universe? Right? Because David Hume would have to say, well, actually, no. But if somebody had asked him if he believed that the universe existed or that the universe was a sensible idea, well, he might have had trouble. But David Hume was a heavy skeptic, and there's something that he said that we'll come to a bit later on that showed that he knew maybe he was pushing it a bit. This one, just a depiction of this, that this is how Hume would like to see it. Objects out there enter our experience through our senses, usually through sight, might be smell, touch, or the other senses. The ideas that we have in our head are copies of impressions. That is, if they are valid ideas. So if you have an idea of something that cannot be traced to a sense impression, like like a triangle without with two sides, or I've got to say, a talented Spice Girl. I used to use that in the day. Then that doesn't count as a proper idea. And our impressions are sense experience experiencing our thoughts. But here is a lovely illustration to reinforce what we did about Hume's fork. Right, on the left-hand side, analytic statements, tautologies, in other words, saying something which doesn't tell you anything new. All bachelors are male, all men are male. That would do very nicely, wouldn't it? Or would it? Sorry, moving on. Right, so they're the examples of analytic statements, formal abstract knowledge, mathematics and logic. Right? Now, David Hume did not deny logic. It was something that he saw as important, but it had to be for him based on stuff that came from impressions, sense experience. Then on the right-hand side, synthetic statements, empirical statements, that is to do with experience, they explain matters of fact, and they come from the five senses, empirical knowledge based on impressions from sense experience. And if somebody's knowledge doesn't come from either the left-hand side or the right-hand side, then they've got to have some strong reasons for believing it to be true. I'm not saying it can't be, but David Hume would challenge them, and I would say one needs to have strong reasons for believing stuff that doesn't fit either the left-hand or the right-hand side. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Because David Hume was his big book was called An Inquiry Concerning Human Understanding, and for love of money I can't find my copy of it, so I haven't brought it here. But it's not a difficult thing to read. It's quite short, really. It's about 100 pages. And in it is one section that I have pondered over decades and decades, and I still get stuff from it. The three laws of association. Resemblance between two ideas causes an association. We look at a particular vegetable and it causes us to think of a body part, right? Why is that? Because presumably there is some kind of resemblance between them, right? We look at a photograph and we think of a person. Why do we do that? Because the photograph resembles that person at some stage in his or her life. So the big one is resemblance between two ideas. Contiguity between two ideas causes an association. If we're going down a street and I see the number 158, then I think, the next one is number 160. And I think of that particularly because we used to live in a street at number 160 there. So if we think of one house, we think of the house next to it. If we think of a school photograph and we see somebody there, we think of somebody who's sitting next to them. That's contiguity, cause and effect. If I think of picking up something too hot, I think of the effect. I think I'm not going to do that. I can imagine what it feels like to picking up something that's too hot. So cause and effect is very much part of the way that our ideas work. And David Hume was the first one to put these down in a systematic form. And in terms of understanding why our minds work the way that they do, I think that was pretty groundbreaking. And that a lot of what David Hume has said, although one can challenge it in various ways, there is very, very illuminating in terms of understanding why it is we think like we do. Right, now here are just 5 suggestions about resemblance. And I say, I am still seriously thinking about this issue of resemblance. Right, this is decades on from when I first read David Hume. Let's take resonance. We were in going to a nature reserve underneath there's a tunnel underneath a motorway that led into a nature reserve. And when we were there, I cannot resist, if I'm in a tunnel, singing a note and hearing it resonate. Well, as you probably know, in a particular building or tunnel or whatever it is, you will have a certain note that resonates more than anything else does. And if you find that, then it will really, the sound will go right through you, won't it, dear? Or if you play the guitar or violin or even a piano, put down the sustaining pedal and sing a note, la, and lo. When you stop singing, you'll hear the note. One way or another, it will be picked up by this instrument. You're not even touching it, but the sound waves through the air cause there to be a resonance in that instrument with that note that you sang. Rhyme. Well, why do we bother with rhyme in poetry? Why have people used rhyme in poetry? Well, part of it is it gives emphasis, doesn't it? It gives a certain sense of inevitability. The same way for other sort of figures of speech, like say, alliteration. When you have the first letter the same in a number of words, it gives emphasis, and that's resemblance. I did mention the third one, right, that an item of fruit or vegetable may lead us to think of a particular body part. I will not ask you for suggestions on this, but if you really are troubled by this one, you can ask me afterwards. Survival value. Oh my, this is a big one, isn't it? If you eat, is there anybody who eats wild mushrooms? Right, yes. If resemblance was not a factor in your thinking, then probably none of the three of us here who fess up to eating wild mushrooms would be here this afternoon, because there are degrees of resemblance, and some very nasty mushrooms can look very much like some very nice ones. Search engines. This is an interesting one, isn't it? You know, you're looking for something. I don't know if you're like me, but I'm not a touch typist, and very frequently I will touch the key that's next to the one that I want. But search engines work on resemblance. Now, I don't know how they calculate this or what the kind of limits or percentages that are put into the, what do you call the things that are behind programs? Begins with an A. It's me age. Algorithms, yeah. That's behind the algorithms. I don't know what they are, but there's obviously, they've set them such that if people like me make a few spelling mistakes in a search, it'll still come up with the thing that you want. Now, I chuck that one your way. If you want to take nothing else from this afternoon, take away this one about resemblance and think about how it applies to life in your experience. This is the one. This is David Hume's disclaimer, right? Nature is always too strong for principle. Basically saying, look, whatever kind of stuff I've been saying in my philosophy, when push comes to shove in terms of living life, then you're going to find that nature will always be stronger than the principle that you had. Now, I'm saving Bertrand Russell for the second half, and soon Genevieve will be appearing, and that will be the end of the first half, but I will just chuck in one little bit from Russell. How many people here remember CND? Right. Did anybody actually get to go on a march? You did! Oh, what a hero! Oh, come on. We must talk about this. I wanted to, but my parents reckon I was too young, so I didn't go on it. But Bertrand Russell was up there in front of everybody with Ban the Bomb, CND, and all the rest of it, and he made some awesome speeches. But I'll clue you this. Bertrand Russell, the skeptic, the one who would doubt everything unless it were proven 3 times over, he spoke of the absolute necessity for us to ensure the continuance of the human species. Well, if you're going to be really sceptical, you can say, okay, why? Other species have gone into extinction. Why should it be that the human species should be kept alive? So nature, in terms of the survival instinct, was too strong for principle, skepticism wherever possible, with Bertrand Russell. So David Hume knew the limits, and he says nature is always too strong for principle. Since Genevieve hasn't yet appeared, I'll say a little bit about my acquaintance with Bertrand Russell. I come from Cornwall, as you would know from the blurb on this afternoon, and I had the honour of going to school with one of Bertrand Russell's love children, because he went to Cornwall on holiday, and you're nodding your head, and spread his influence around quite considerably in the area. Anybody else with, what shall I say, tidbits on Bertrand Russell? Yes. Oh, sorry. Don't go to an auction, or you'll buy a load of gear you don't want. Do you want to say a little bit about your experience on CND?
Oh my goodness, it was an awfully long time ago. We went in the lower sixth on the march from Aldermot.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I don't remember very much about it.
Would you say it was an educational experience?
Oh, most certainly.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe.
Certainly.
I believe if I. Sorry.
Small halls with complete strangers.
Yes.
Like
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure my parents had my my general well-being at heart in not letting me go, but I'm sure it would have been a very, very educational experience. And anyway, right. Well, let's press on because now stay steady. I'm asking you, what do you think about this one? The whole problem with the world, said Russell, is that fools and fanatics are always so certain of themselves, and wiser people so full of doubts. Now, he seemed pretty sure of that. How many people saw Russell on the Brains Trust? No? We didn't have TV, but my cousins had it, and sorry?
I remember the Brains Trust.
But you don't remember Russell on it?
Was Bertrand Russell on it? Can I?
I'm sure he was on it at some stage, but anyhow, he was always, again, extremely sceptical. But what do you think? Is it better to be full of doubts than to be certain of yourself? I shall offer you some thoughts on that a bit later on, but it would be nice if you pondered that over coffee or whatever you're drinking. Yes, I will offer you some challenges to that. Sorry, yes.
Can I ask a question? You said about Berkeley earlier on.
Yeah.
And Berkeley ruling out space and time.
Oh, absolute space and time.
Yeah.
Yes.
So why did governments overrule him with biblical and theological institutions? Because they developed 3 calendars throughout the millennium.
Yes.
Of Gregorian, Julian, and Enoch.
Yes, indeed. A very good point Gary's making there, that people who didn't like what Berkeley was saying, on theological grounds, that yes, the Julian calendar, Gregorian, what's the other one?
Enoch. There was an Enoch calendar.
An
as well,
Enoch
which works
calendar.
on 364 days of the summer.
Oh, right. Yes. Right, a good point to make. Let's get this boring stuff out of the way on Russell though a minute. So, 1872 he was born, Trinity College, and then publishes the Principia Mathematica. Has anybody ever tried to read that? But it was in the school library. You have? No. It was in the school library when I was at school, and I remember taking it out and looking at it, and the first page I gave up. As I say, I was never very good at maths, but the whole deal about it was to try to put maths on a logical footing. And we shall see as the afternoon develops that Russell himself discovered a fatal flaw in that whole project. So the Principia Mathematica, though it was a great project, Russell himself undermined it. Interestingly, imprisoned for pacifism, received the Nobel Prize for Literature. And here we have CND, Russell there, coming away from the microphone. We're in the back row. Well, we will get into this one, which is known commonly as the Barber paradox. Just check out, this will show your age actually. Anybody here did set theory in school as part of primary maths? If you did, would you raise your hand? No, okay. Apparently this is what they do set theory, which is it's an easy thing for kids to get into, and it's very useful. But the Barber paradox throws up an issue in set theory which caused a lot of controversy. Right, a sign on a barber's shop. Not a kind of shop I go into much these days, but I shave all who do not shave themselves. So of course some wag decides, well, who shaves the barber? Ponder that a moment. I shave all who do not shave themselves. Who shaves the barber? Yes, at the back. So another.
He shaves himself.
But then he shaves those who don't shave themselves. Right? So this is the problem, that if he shaves himself, then he shouldn't be shaving himself according to this. And Genevieve has come back. I leave you to ponder the Barber paradox as you drink your coffee. Thank you.
For a coffee break.